Okay, so welcome to the second, what are we calling these? Still beta?
Yeah,
I think it's still very much beta, aren't they, given we're slightly late. But yeah, we may as well get on with it. I think today we're going to be going with 2 topics and 2 people and trying that format. We've got 2 related topics, which are quite interestingly related, and yeah, I suppose we should get into it. So I've got to remember to click down rather than trying to so yeah, quickly we'll just do an intro for people who haven't been to these before. We are today doing sort of betas, trying to see the format of how we should do this, and going forward in 2021 we'll be introducing more formats and more ways of doing this. But right now we are going into this format of basically going through 2 to 4 topics with 2 to 4 people. We've already gone through it and got some points of view that we'd like to do. Obviously other people, in this one we're still in beta and we haven't got a lot of participants, but the participants can add to that. And so the version that you see edited on YouTube should have some more insights. But at the end of the day, we already have a so what from our inside knowledge of the industry on these, which should be something like, although nowhere near as enjoyable, as the format of when we used to have a coffee with colleagues or a beer, or sit next to them on a plane, or whatever we did that got us out of the usual work space. So that's enough rambling. Let's get on to it. So there's been a lot about OpenRan, and I think for good reason. And so I don't know if shall I kick this one off? And
please do.
So apparently the deployments have been going well, which is for good reason, I think. But what is interesting is that obviously a lot of the 5G networks that MNOs are rolling out is for people to actually use with 5G devices, which they don't seem to be buying so much, which we'll get into in the next topic. But for now, OpenRan has some huge benefits, and I think the ones that I'd like to kick off are basically from a small network, and we have our own GSMA license and we have our own cells. Those cells were pretty much tied to what you had to do, and so you created those cells and that's it. Having the layers broken up, and I can, if anyone wants to get a link to there are some very good videos out there on the internet that explain very concisely how OpenRan works, if no one's familiar with it or they want to brush up on it. But essentially, in the olden days of having a fixed provider with fixed hardware, caused a problem, because just as we have small sites in Minnesota, they're not necessarily the sites that we would use elsewhere, and as you expanded, they're not the sort of sites that you would use. We're now getting to situations where there are cells on boats, there are cells in different places, and in short, we've built out a fully cloud enabled service, and what we've learned from that is that the hardware can support a lot more. And there aren't the physical bottlenecks of physical proprietary hardware or software in the way. So in short, the previous network that we built before Connecto had about, I'd say, almost 100 times the server space and server electricity cost than for the like-to-like amount of subscribers than Connecto has on open hardware and open software. Now that is huge. It's a huge impact on OPEX, on CAPEX, but also the flexibility of the product. So we originally launched in one geography, and as we moved to another geography, then we were able to do so because it was non-proprietary and it was fully cloud. And so from my point of view, this move couldn't come quicker enough, because ultimately it's going to save the network operators money, make the service better and cheaper, is my view of it. I don't know. Sorry, I'll hand over to you now, Carl.
Yeah, I mean, it's as you say, it is, the cost implication is huge. I mean, we've discussed pricing previously, and certainly for data, the networks are at a loss, either from an accounting point of view, or actually we don't know point of view what the cost of a megabyte or gigabyte is. The USP, and I always come from I guess a customer focused point of view or a commercial point of view. The USP of our coverage is the best. It's still, I mean, network operators use it, but it's still somewhat limited, frankly, as a USP, and diminishing. Because if you've not got coverage in certain parts, certainly in any of the cities or urban conurbations, then you've not got a product. So by ripping the cost out, by using OpenRan to rip a huge amount of investment, I think especially with the conservative technical culture that there is in the MNOs, as much as they like to think they're very innovative, you know, if you look at all the networks and who provided the infrastructure, you can probably count on one hand or a little more the suppliers. And therefore, the model we see moving quite strongly to probably the same vendors, because that's easy to sign off, but probably with an OpenRan model rather than proprietary. The USP is not in investing billions in that infrastructure. USP is getting that down to a lower cost and having the flexibility to lower latency. If you're looking at 5G, lower latency, but faster and better coverage, all the network slicing stuff that comes with that, and the ability to implement that quickly, cheaply, and ideally in the cloud. So it's one that I see everyone's kicked it around and had the strategic discussions for a few years, but realistically, in the last 18 months, sort of 2 years, it's become real. And, you know, you've seen some of the bigger guys, the Telefonicas, the Vodafones, bite the bullet and implement this, and either as ecosystems with half a dozen or more larger companies with various specialists filling in their roles, or as you know, as the network hubs start to establish in the couple in Europe, couple in the US, and they're fairly multi-billion market cap companies, because mobile companies don't want to be messing around with the radio access networks. So it's here to stay. The investment will go into that, and I think the initial use case is ripping cost out, but as things progress, we'll get more and more use cases as engineers learn about what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's critical. I mean, I don't think so whilst you know, cloud, I think that big companies have lacked on cloud because of the nature of it.
Yeah.
I mean, the benefit of this obviously is the same benefits that we've seen from cloud of non-proprietary hardware and non-proprietary software, and being able to interoperate. I think is something that they've done probably out of necessity, isn't it? In that we have situations that, you know, can we Huawei, can we not Huawei? We've had lots of smaller vendors coming in at different prices, and you know, it's kind of difficult. And I think the other element is we've already learned. If you look at the operators, I mean, operationally, you've seen this previously, and I know from working in operators. I mean, so for example, just the App Store projects, they were a nightmare, because essentially both Vodafone and Telefonica, who were trying to integrate the apps in and the APIs in, even though a Movistar Spain and a Telefonica UK are all in the same group, and well, I mean, it's a bad example because they have different names in different countries. But if you look at Vodafone, even though Vodafone is, you know, big red Vodafone logo or whatever in every country, ultimately in Spain it was Airtel, and it had a vendor for its equipment, and that could not be changed. And so when you're trying to integrate innovative products, then essentially it's ultimately as if it was still Airtel. And if you add that to the fact that they, now they don't know if they'll be able to put Huawei in the next few years or not, and maybe that lack of competition means that you can't effectively buy cheaply in the meantime, which is, from a network operator point of view, is terrible. No? I mean, it's. I think they've kind of been pushed into it, but ultimately, it's going to be good for customers.
Yeah, I think so. And again, with my customer champion hat on, I think, the case for it is made with OpenRan. The case is made purely on cost. The flexibility that will come in, I think we don't fully understand what the business models are. But as it gets rolled out and customers start asking for things and business models will appear, I think the nature of OpenRan over the next 3 to 5 years will morph quite considerably. And I think, therefore, there's a number of business cases that will come forward, and revenue opportunities, either directly with the operators themselves or as a third-party client, to go generate revenues that impact in the network operator, which should be music to their ears, is effectively a wholesale model. And that will, that will become prevalent. What does that look like at the moment? I think a lot of us don't know. We've got ideas and we've got suggestions. We know some of the basic high-level cases, but I think that even in 6 months and 12 months, this will look very, very different. But the good thing is, it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop because it's not a build it where they will come. It's a build it and we'll save a lot of money before we even start thinking about the revenue upside on this.
But I mean, yeah, it is. But I mean, I think, we're probably going from being very nice to very harsh to them. But I think, ultimately, we're kind of lucky in Europe in that you can probably cover the whole of what's the highest point of southern England we go cycling in? Was it 400 feet or something?
Yeah, quite.
You can kind of cover a temperate, rolling hills, chalky, small island, probably with one vendor pretty well. But even then, you can tell that I know there's frequency issues in the background, but the way that you would cover a dense urban area or an inner city versus a country, and as we go to private 5G networks, etc., you're going to need that flexibility.
Yeah.
But also, just from operational points of view, I've been helping network operators where we've had to have, with some of the vendors, trying to get those 2 hours a day when you can get because it's proprietary to so many levels. You need the guy in the US, the guy in Sweden, the guy in China, and the guy in Australia, and it's just, seriously, we've got a 2 hour window to work on this every day. Yeah. Just from the operational support, and things change, right? We've seen in the last 10 years the ownership of the vendors, the political situation of vendors, and the access. I don't think we seem to be going from 4G to 5G, and now people are talking about 6G ever quicker. I seem to remember having a few generations of devices at 2G and 3G, and now it's almost, your next upgrade is the next G. So good. Well, yeah, I think it's for us, it's a fantastic topic, because also it just makes it a lot easier for us to add value to that chain.
Yeah.
Whereas before we had 5 people in X vendor and 10 people in Y vendor, and if you're working on projects around the world, that was really difficult. So yeah, good. Well, this actually brings us, because if you look at the GSMA intelligence, it actually, I'll put the link in the video that we do, but it actually then went on to speak about handsets. And from last week's episode, we got thinking on what the impact is of people slowing down in getting the top-end 5G devices, because everybody was building a 5G network on roaming revenues, or data at a certain level. The amount of data is going up, the renewals are going down, the cost is higher, I suppose, of building a network, or well, it certainly is, because you can't get rid of all these offices in such short notice. So does this mean that all this pent-up demand will see everybody queuing with or without a mask to get their 6G devices? It'll be 6G, probably by the touch wood, it'll still be 5G devices. Or will they be going SIM-only stroke MVNO?
Well, there's a question, really. I mean, I think that the trend to do SIM-free devices has certainly accelerated over the last 6 to 12 months. Certainly in the business world, the bring your own device has been a hot topic for 3 to 5 years, really. Probably more like 5 years, actually, now I think about it.
It depends on the territory, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. But I've seen certainly in Western Europe, US, the desire to just take the network service without the hardware and to strip that back, and therefore the cost has accelerated. I think in terms of if you split the markets into two, if I jump back to the consumer side of the market, the question is, I've got a great device. It's an iPhone XS or 11 or whatever. On the Android side, it's a $400 to $800 handset that's 12 months. Well, even at the higher end, my point is at the higher end, you've had that now for 18 months. My natural cycle will be to upgrade. And the question is, to do what? And we've said this before. And therefore, why would you? Okay, if you drop in, it smashes, you've got no choice. If you need to upgrade because you suddenly fell in love with 300 apps you didn't have before, then I get it, because you need to upgrade your memory. But there are very limited reasons to do it, and it's what do you want your phone to do? And if you're stuck at home, which most people are at the moment, one shape or form, the opportunity to go show all your friends your latest technical gizmo isn't there. So what does it mean for the general consumer is, why would I? And therefore that will accelerate a trend for SIM-free. And probably like we do, we use a multi-SIM device. And therefore, if I want to swap in and swap out various MVNOs on a SIM basis, without even getting to eSIM, on a SIM basis, it's quite simple to do. And I think this trend will continue. So for MVNOs, fantastic. It lowers the barrier to entry, and it lowers the barrier to configuration and everything that goes with that. For MNOs, well, I've seen this coming, it's just never materialized. So I don't think the churn rates will materially affect the MNOs, because the churn rates will probably stay about the same. But the MVNOs, because of that much smaller, will get bigger crumbs off the table, but it'll be no more than that, I think, in the short term. So not the MNOs don't really lose, the MVNOs do gain.
Yes. Well, I think, and whilst a lot of people will be scratching their head going, how does that math work?
Yeah.
I think it goes back to what we discussed last week of eSIM and multi-SIM. More and more people will keep that device and go, I think, SIM only, and maybe have an MVNO SIM. It's interesting. It's going to be interesting times, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, it's one of the facts I was just going to chuck out there has come out today, and I mean, I know it's the UK market, but I'd see a trend in certainly in a lot of other markets as well. The effect of lockdown that 3 network in the UK has, reported that their data figures and data has doubled over the last period. I think 6 months to 12 months. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's just a significant period. And they're now doing an average of 15 gig per subscriber. which is huge when you think about it. 3 years ago, you were looking at pushing a gig, if not under. Now I know they focus on data and their whole business strategy is based on data, so they were always at the top end in terms of usage and encourage that with their pricing. But the fact it's being used is the question. So I see that trend accelerating. So gone back to therefore what do you want from a handset, the data connectivity, and therefore the graphics and the user interface, certainly GUI on a phone is going to become more and more important.
It is interesting. It's I'm smiling there because I was on a project, or we as in Virtuser were on a project. I don't think you were there at the time, but definitely Keith and I were in Mexico building a 4G only network, where we're doing the wholesale strategy for. I think we can say we were working with one of the biggest. A big turnkey network build company, and the very clever guys there were working out that as the speed of the network goes up and the size of the screen goes up and the size of the camera goes up, that we should be at I think they had 15 to 20 gig by 2020, and there were various camps of people falling off of their chair, people going, "You what?" But then there's the people who sit down and actually think about things and go, "Do you know what? That's actually right." Now, obviously, they didn't. I don't think they were clever chaps, but I don't think they foresaw a pandemic. I can go back and ask them, but I'm pretty sure, and I wouldn't believe them if they did. But it is, I mean, we may have seen a slight blip, etc. But I mean, from the stats that we see, I think that's it. Yeah. That's.
But it's not going away, is it?
It's not, no. And yeah, I mean, what's the point of building these faster networks and getting these faster devices if
you're going to throttle it?
They don't go faster. Yeah. So good. So the so what's of today. For me, are that OpenRan is, I think, a fantastic opportunity for everybody, for the operators to cut costs and for ourselves to work more deeply with them without having to use expensive and difficult to get hold of resources of the operators as the market moves to move forward, and indeed even enable these. Sometimes we couldn't enable 15 gig for everybody because the software, hardware, etc. in the middle wouldn't enable it. So you can swap that out, and yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I personally find what's happening and what we're doing very interesting with OpenRan. It's answered a lot of problems that we've had, not just with mobile, but even building fixed wireless access and Wi-Fi networks going back. And yeah, I'm quite excited that we've sort of, today's topic is built on last week. Well, the previous topic, it wasn't quite last week, it was 2-3 weeks ago. But yeah, the knock-on of the eSIM plus this OpenRan is that we are seeing a lot more of the SIMs getting into these handsets as people are keeping them, and they're not necessarily just going down the route of new operator, new handset. New handset, new new bundle, new subscriber. Thank you. I don't know if that's. And tell me if I've just resumed everything.
I've just a couple of points really. I'd say, look, on because you're absolutely right, and you're looking at it from the OpenRan, the technical point of view, and all that great stuff. But I look at it, I guess OpenRan quite simply is new revenue opportunities. We don't know what we know. I guess the first generation opportunities are, of course, but there will be lots of new opportunities. There'll be quite a few niche which equals not a lot of competition initially, and we need, there's pieces of work that need to be done around. Well, what does that look like? The usual market analysis, entry, strategy stuff that I think we've got a finger on the pulse with that.
More vendor selections, multiple vendor selections.
Yeah, exactly. And I think going back to the handset side, I'm glad I'm not working for a handset manufacturer this year.
They will be okay, I think.
I'm sure they'll survive.
Yeah.
Bonus, bonus notwithstanding.
I did find it funny earlier. I was asking myself if the new Moto G5G was 5G, because the Nemeng, and in my what little defense I can have for that, I think the fact that the names of handsets have not necessarily followed any logical order. But yeah, I think G5G was. But the reason I brought that up was not to poke fun at myself. It was just that I was surprised at what level of handset you can get 5G, a great 5G device. In our last episode, we're talking about very expensive Samsungs, and not even the, it's not even the S20. It was the S20 Plus. But if you can get a G5G with 5G, with dual SIM as well, I mean, yeah.
Well, it's not difficult, is it? You get them for what, $300 give or take, and why do you want to spend $800 on a high end, or even more if it's an iPhone?
Especially if you can't, put it on the table in the cafe and be in the airport queue showing everybody.
Exactly. Cool. All right.
All right.
Good session. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you.